It's time for AggroChat, the official podcast of the Tales of the Aggronaut blog and stalwart gaming community, where we talk about stuff and things, and the stuff about the things, and sometimes gaming. I'm Belgast, and let's start the show. Hey folks, it's that time again. Time for another episode of AggroChat. This is episode 258. Tonight I'm joined by Ammo.
Hello.
Ashgar.
I don't know any special significance to 258.
Neither do I. Grace.
I'm not used to being third, but this is fun.
Kodra.
I mean, it's 100 off of the number of electoral votes there are in our democratic process for the Americans.
Damn.
I also can't think of any significance to the number 200 and whatever it was. I've already forgotten.
Thalen.
I'm entirely used to being last.
It's a good place. As a T last name person, I'm used to being at the end of lists. Also, my queue went down by 100.
Yay.
Yay.
I just make sure that I have a conversation window open.
Okay. So, we can talk about Kodra breaking the system later. We have some spillover topics, and we'll start with those. World Next Door.
So, this is a game that I saw at PAX West, and I was pretty intrigued by it. The idea is that you are trying to sort of match symbols together to cast spells off of the ground as enemies run around and try and kill you. And you are also trying to shift the runes. So it is like a matching game, except like in this, it's interesting because your cursor that you are moving around is now you and is fighting monsters, which adds a different element than I usually see in these types of games. I don't know if this is actually something that's very common because I don't typically play the matching games very often, but it was really intriguing and fun.
What platform is this on?
I played it on, I believe I played it on the computer. Or no, I played that on the Switch.
Played this on Switch.
I played this on Switch, right. It's on a number of different ones. But it's got a nice art style. And I don't know, it's a cute story about this interesting world where you're a bunch of high schoolers dealing with the fact that there are two worlds, one of monsters and one of humans, and you're the human trapped in the monster world, and this becomes a problem.
It sounds vaguely familiar.
I can't imagine where I've heard about a game with a similar theme before.
But I don't know, the idea of an action puzzler is really interesting to me, where normally it feels a little bit more abstracted. The idea that the way they presented it was very cool to me, because you have all of these runes on the ground, and if you gather a collection of runes together, you can cast a spell. And different runes cause different spells to happen. And so you can move the runes by picking one up and swapping it for another one that's out there. And then, so that's how you're trying to build up sets of runes to cast spells and sort of build up your board of runes so that you can cast a bunch of spells in sequence to defeat the monsters you're fighting. And it did a good job at keeping me engaged and more involved in the puzzling aspect than I usually am with those types of games. Usually it feels like the artifice is a little bit too thin for me. And it didn't...
Games like Puzzle Quest?
Yeah. Yeah, Puzzle Quest is a game where it's there's this story that is being told, and I am engaging with this story by doing these interesting puzzles that don't really feel like they are part of this story. I feel like, for me, a big thing in games is somehow getting me to buy the mechanics as, part of the game's narrative rather than just, the mechanical inputs that I need to put in order for, the game to be engaging to me, the player. I think that's called immersion, but that's one of those words that's totally overused in video games, so...
I mean, there's a bunch of words that you can use, but they're all annoying.
It's interesting to me what games will feel this is just the story is happening completely separate from the the like actual gameplay that I'm doing.
I'm mad because the thing you're talking about has an actual name.
Yep. Sure does.
It does, but I know that if you say that name, then
You're
like
gonna be
hipsters
mad.
come and eat you.
Yeah.
Pretty much.
For the audience, the term being referred to is ludonarrative dissonance, or whatever the opposite of that is.
Ludonarrative resonance?
Yeah. I think it's actually assonance. But
I can't even with that.
yeah.
I know that's a word, but
It's interesting because I don't feel like those games are dissonant. I feel like there is a complete divorce from the Ludo and the narrative. Like, Ludo being game and narrative being, narrative. So we understand half of that word intuitively.
See, I assumed this was a story about the dog from Labyrinth.
No. It's weird because there are
dog,
a number of games that trigger this that feel like they shouldn't. Like, one of the ones I struggled with was Dragalia Lost, where it felt like there was this story that was being told, and then there were these scenes where I do this action thing, and those felt completely divorced from each other. Even though, like, what you are doing in the action kind of fundamentally makes sense. You're going around and you're fighting monsters. It's just you kept fighting the same monsters in sort of the same environments, and it just felt like there was some theater where you heard story, and then, oh, now we're gonna run you through this tiny little Diablo dungeon. That's kind of how I feel with Puzzle Quest. It's like, there's this story, and then now it's solve these puzzles.
Yeah, what you're doing mechanically and what the story is suggesting aren't really the same thing.
I feel like that's part of it. I don't know. I feel like there has to be a little bit more. Like, this gets even into, like, different things where if you're doing screen transitions between two things, that can be, like, breaking you out of that seamless, like the action and the story are in the same, like, screen real estate somehow.
Yeah.
Like, this is always why, for me, the game that first got me into RPGs in general was it Chrono Trigger? That was the one that, like, if the monsters were in the overworld, and if you encountered them, it just sort of, like, briefly froze the screen and then set up a battle for you.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yeah.
Like, just to that essence of not having me, like, whip, fade to black, and then a combat pops up randomly. Like, let me feel like I was in the world, and, like, it wasn't just transitioning me to the new battle mechanics.
well, the first game I can remember really doing that was Legend of Zelda 2, because, like, its overworld had just random mobs roaming around, and if you happen to not cursor over, but hit the same cell that they were on, it would take you into a battle scene.
Yeah, but even that would, like, cut to black, and then your overworld to actual game world was completely different. Like, it stuck you in the middle of some hostile environment, but it still did, like, a hard cut to a new gameplay mode.
I guess I don't remember Chrono Trigger that much on the way that those mobs popped up.
Like, they were
Chrono Trigger's big thing is that there is no fight whoosh at all. There are sometimes some areas where you get into encounters and the enemies spawn right there on the map, and you fight them right there on the map.
Mm-hmm.
There is no separate battle screen like there is for, like, every Final Fantasy game.
Yeah, which honestly I think is the part of the reason they started doing that is so they could have fancier looking enemies on the battle screen.
Yes.
Like, it was
That's what Chrono
definitely-
Trigger gives up. It doesn't
Yeah.
have neat fight backgrounds like even like FF5 does, and nothing with complexity of like Neo Exdeath's sprite.
Yeah. And I see that in like the more modern Final Fantasies where they're trying really, really hard to get away from the like turn-based battle transitions, because now they can actually show off their cool art in the overworld as well, which is sort of an interesting, it's like I can see what they're trying to get at, but it also is somewhat distracting if what you're going for is a different, like if what you liked was the transition into combat.
Anyways, I don't have much more to say about it. The game was short. I hope they make some more. Like, they give you a very clear, like, this is going to be 4 dungeons you do, and then you do 4 dungeons, and it's, like, even knowing that it's going to end after you do 4 dungeons, it still feels abrupt in its ending. It's just like, yep, you did the 4 dungeons, and now we're done. And there didn't feel like there was a huge apotheosis moment. I guess there were some good story beats, like, in the Act 2, like, between Dungeon 3 and 4, that were really interesting. All of the characters were well fleshed out. I'd like to see them do more, but if you haven't had a chance, and this sounds interesting, I recommend checking it out.
Cool. Another thing that's come out that we haven't talked about here yet, and I don't know if anyone is actually playing it, but the Niantic Harry Potter AR game, Wizards Unite, released, or Magic the Pokemon Going. I mean, so I've piddled with this a little bit, and it's no Pokemon Go. It has some issues, because it very much feels like a game that they tried to take all the concepts from Pokemon Go and somehow make them work with Harry Potter. So instead of running around catching Pokemon, you are working for the Ministry of Magic, and you are trying to protect Muggles from seeing things that they shouldn't see by getting rid of these confoundable spells. So instead of throwing a Pokeball, you're swiping on your phone to cast a spell, and that is a way harder movement to do on a phone than like everybody can get into their own rhythm for how they want to throw a Pokeball, but essentially they place a pictogram on the screen, and however close you trace it, which depends on a whole bunch of factors, like depends on the angle at which you're holding your finger, so how much of your finger surface is touching the screen, how fine of a resolution your digitizer has on your phone. So you're trying to trace this thing, and depending on how closely you line it perfectly to the shape on the screen dictates how successful your spellcast was. And the biggest challenge that I've had has been, in Pokemon Go, I never really struggled that much with Pokeballs. Whereas in Harry Potter, every time you cast a spell, you use spell energy, and you have, I think, 75 spell energy to start out with, and every time you flub a spell, you're also using a point of spell energy. And especially at first, you're going to flub most of the spells that you cast, which means you're going to be desperate for Pokestops, which are now inns and greenhouses and other things, with no fixed energy gain. So basically, like, there's like a little mini game at each one of these types of things that you encounter that dictates how much spell energy you regenerate.
So I'm vaguely amused that, like, there's spell energy in this game, because that's always one of, like, is there any concept of, like, one of the things that I never got reading Harry Potter was, like, does magic wear you out? Like, that never seemed explicitly explained in the books.
It comes up occasionally, but yeah.
Like, that's not a concept that I remember from Harry Potter, but it is a concept I remember from Harry Dresden.
I was going to say, one of the things that's kind of, like, challenging to me about Harry Potter in general is the magic system is kind of ill-defined, because it's whatever J.K. Rowling needed it to be for any given scene. And yeah, the like, trying to codify magic into Harry Potter is amusing to me. I actually think they should have, like, stuck to something smaller, like maybe you are trying, like, follow the magical beast and where to find them. Maybe you're finding, like, creatures out in the world and trying to, like, capture them so that, you know, the Muggles wouldn't get hurt by them, or actually working for, you know, Arthur Weasley and the misuse of magical Muggle artifacts, and, like, you're looking for enchanted normal items that muggles might use and trying to confiscate those.
Because I never played it, what was the limiting mechanic in Ingress?
Energy.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, honestly, like, these 3 games have been an evolution along a curve, because you can kind of tie loosely some of the things from Ingress to Pokemon Go, and now you can tie loosely everything that Pokemon Go had to Wizards Unite, but they added a bunch of complexity that makes it awkward. Probably the most awkward system is you can brew potions. And potions require a bunch of different ingredients. The problem is you get these ingredients randomly. Like, they'll just be lying on the ground, and you pick them up, or you get them when you go to a greenhouse or something like that. But your inventory system is the same inventory system from Pokemon Go, where you have storage for 200 items. So if you aren't getting the items you need to be able to craft the potions that you want to make, you may have, like, 3 of the 4 components needed for the potion, but you're not getting any of the thing you need. So your inventory is just now bloated with materials that you can't use in any way. But they will happily sell you the components that you're missing with gold.
Well, of course.
They will happily sell you more spell energy anytime you run out for somewhere between $1 and $2. It feels like there's way more blatant money grabs in this one than there were in Pokemon Go.
Yeah, I've been playing around with it. I played it for like 2 days. I maybe a total of an hour, and I bounced off it really hard. And I've spent the entire time since that happened trying to figure out why.
I have not a lot of interest in the theme of, hey, I'm a wizard cop.
Yeah, like, I don't like the theme. The theme isn't doing it any favors. And I don't really like the implementation. Like, Pokemon, you go around and catch Pokemon infinitely because it makes sense that you would do that. Like, if you go out and catch Pokemon, there's a lot of Pokemon because they live in places. You're going and catching them. That's what you expect. With this, it's like, there feels like they've built a finite end state, because the game feels like it's pandering. Like, it's sticking a bunch of Harry Potter proper nouns into itself without really considering whether that makes sense.
I think the place where that feels the worst is the way that Harry Potter and Hermione Granger are just kind of shoehorned into this game.
It's everything.
And they don't even make sense to be in the game at all.
Yeah, no, they don't make sense. It's like every single random encounter that you run into is Harry Potter proper noun is in trouble because of this thing. And like, I've probably gone on a tear about things that make worlds feel smaller rather than bigger. And this makes the Harry Potter world feel minuscule. Like, there are 12 people that matter. Anybody who is not mentioned in the books doesn't exist. There's like one character that they created for the game. Literally everything else is not only a named character, but is a named character from the books. So you get this like...
Well, it's a named character, or they're a nameless Slytherin student, or a nameless Gryffindor student, or whatever. Like, they didn't make any new real characters other than the one.
And like, the reason this works in Pokemon is because you can have 10,000 unnamed Charmanders running around for your random encounters, because Charmanders got to live somewhere. Why not here? This is in fact where Charmanders live. It's why you walked over here. The whole conceit is consistent that way. With this, it's like, why does this same person keep on showing up, and why is nobody else around? Like, I don't know. The whole thing, kind of going back to what Kodra was talking about earlier with game mechanics and the game's ostensible story making sense, this doesn't.
Well, and one of the things that feels awful is you don't even have a character, per se. You have, like, this house-colored apparition on the map called a Magical Me, which that in itself annoys me too, the name of it. But, like, you don't get to customize the person you are in the world because you're apparently not actually there. You're somewhere else at a desk job, but also kind of just roaming around the world as an apparition, which begs the question, how are you casting the spells?
Weird.
This is a mess. Like, Pokemon Go was charming. Pokemon Go managed to make all of the things you were like, oh, this isn't Pokemon like the Game Boy Pokemon, and it's aware of that, but all of the ways in which it wasn't were charming.
Mostly.
I mean, the one thing it's got going for it, I haven't gotten to do because I don't know anybody playing this game. Supposedly, instead of gyms, you have fortresses, and it's some kind of multiplayer battle game as you progress through the fortress. So, like, if 3 of us were there playing, we could do a dungeon crawler in the Harry Potter universe, which in itself makes no freaking sense, but whatever, let's get past that. It's a cool idea for a game. Maybe not this game.
Yeah, the weirdest part about this is as I was playing it, I found myself wishing that it wasn't Harry Potter themed because I think it would have been better.
It absolutely would have been better. Like, it feels weird.
Yeah.
It feels weird to shoehorn Harry Potter onto this.
Yes.
It's like, so, okay, this is a deep cut that maybe only Phelan will remember, but, like, Star Trek has had a really bad history with merchandising.
A little bit.
And in the 70s, there was a police helmet that was reskinned
The
with
Spock
Star Trek.
helmet.
Yeah, that has just Spock written
It's-
onto the side of this police helmet.
Well, it's like a white plastic helmet with like a red light on the top, and then a label that says Spock stuck on it. It's because that's
Kind
that's
of
what they
how
did.
I feel about this game.
Yeah, because the toy company that got the license was like, Star Trek is huge. We've got all this stuff that we've already got. Just like replace the stickers with something related to Star Trek. Get it out on the market. The kids will buy it because kids are dumb.
Because there were space trains. But yeah, I mean, like, it's not a horrible game. It's not a horrible experience. It's just a very confused experience.
Yeah. And it's a confused experience that doesn't make me want to spend any more time in it, which is not good for what it is.
Right. They are not going... I mean, Ingress found its niche eventually. Pokemon Go still has a devoted fan base. I do not think anyone is really going to be a devoted fan base for this game.
Yeah, I agree with that.
So, moving on. Vermintide.
Oh, man. So,
Warhammer.
go for it.
Warhammer Left 4 Dead.
Pretty much. With, importantly, RPG progression.
Yeah.
Like, the thing that got me to check out of Left 4 Dead, which I thought was a good game, and I, despite not actually liking zombies as a concept all that much, I rather liked Left 4 Dead because it was just fun. And then I played it a few times. I played it over a weekend, had a good time, and never felt any desire to play it again because I'd seen the things that it did. Vermintide has RPG progression. So you get new gear and you get new classes and your classes level up, and there's 5 characters that have 3 classes apiece that all do similar but different things.
Yeah. Like the dwarf has a ranger class, has Ironbreaker, and of course has Slayer. And so you can be
In case you don't
be
like wearing
ranged.
shirts.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
So you,
I love Ironbreakers.
yeah. So you can be predominantly ranged, or you can be taunt things and they don't hurt you as much, or you can be a mohawked madman.
And and sort of throughout every other class has similar things it's doing. And wind up playing surprisingly differently. Even the one that I'm playing, the Bright Wizard, you're a fire mage. There's the
Fire Mage.
yes,
I
are.
mean, fire is involved.
Fire is involved. There's a lot of it.
Yes.
But what's neat about it is like the first Bright Wizard class is like pretty much what you expect. And I learned enough about it to be like, oh, okay, so this class gives me infinite ammo and says, this is a ranged class that gives me infinite ammo at the cost of, if this bar gets all the way up, you die. And that's concerning. You don't want to be there. So you got to manage it.
Yep. Funnily enough, the dwarf also gets one of its classes that does that, because the Ironbreaker uses the Dragonfire weapons.
Yeah.
So they don't use ammo, but they can overheat, at which point they explode, and it's bad.
The second wizard that you unlock, there's a melee wizard that you can unlock, which I haven't gotten to, but it's like, hey, did you want to be more like fire swords and stuff? Like, that's cool. But the second mage, even though it's still a ranged fire class, it's also like leaning really hard into being the bad ideas part. But yeah, it's really fun. I really enjoy that you can jump in with people with vastly different levels. So like, we jumped in with somebody who was level 1, somebody who was level 5, and somebody who was level 11, and it just worked. It was fine. It wasn't trivialized by the higher level person, nor was it just a disaster for the lower level people.
Yeah, and the lower levels absolutely, participated and were, and made a difference.
Yeah. But yeah, it felt really good. I really enjoyed it.
Also, the 5 characters are 5 unique people, not just 5, archetypes or whatever. And they have personalities and interactions, and they're very entertaining.
That was a surprise.
Yeah, they're a party, but they don't necessarily like each other all that much.
The Witch Hunter has opinions about the Bright Wizard.
Yeah.
Is that because she might be a witch?
Yes.
Also, there is a dwarf and an elf.
Yes.
Imagine what they say to each other.
I mean, mostly it's the elf being really snarky at the dwarf. The dwarf loves everyone.
I do like when the dwarf snarks back at the elf though, because one of the lines that I remember hearing was the elf is like, you know what I think, dwarf, and his response is, does anybody know? How would I know what an elf thinks? Does anybody know what an elf thinks? No. It's like, oh, okay, I see. Elf dwarf hostilities are going strong,
working as intended.
But yeah, it's already a really good game. And if you have any attachment at all to the old world, the Warhammer Fantasy setting, like, it's just so much better because of that.
I admit to not having a lot of attachment to that setting, and I wish they'd set things in the new setting mostly. But I still like it.
Definitely gives me Storm Fiends and concerns about Storm Fiends. Those things are terrifying.
Yeah, but they just got nerfed, so I'm sure they aren't as terrifying as they used to be.
Yeah, because as you might expect from a game called Vermintide, you're fighting lots and lots of Skaven. Also Chaos Warriors, because the Skaven made friends, like, between games. But lots of Skaven.
Yeah, they give you enough, they give you a nice amount of variety in the enemy types as well, which I like.
So, another thing that came out recently is Super Mario Maker 2 on the Switch.
Yup, it came out on Friday.
I think so, yeah.
It's very good. So there is one of the things that I'm digging the most about this is the new tagging system, because it lets me look for levels that get tagged with specific tags. So like, I really am enjoying doing a lot of the puzzle solving levels, and there's a specific tag for puzzle solving, and I can also make sure I'm avoiding the tags for speedrun, which are mostly miserable. But yeah, it's really good. It's Mario Maker on the Switch, and the new improvements are very noticeable. The addition of on-off switches is great. There's so much cool stuff people are already doing with that, and I really am digging the Mario 3D Land levels. Cat Mario is a ton of fun to play with.
I've already seen some insane nonsense involving those on-off blocks.
I believe this.
Yeah.
They got rid of mid-airs, though.
That's probably for the best.
It is. Everyone agrees. Like, there are still plenty of shell jumps to be done, but that specific trick you no longer need to do.
Remembering correctly, this is the trick where you have to jump off of a shell that you just threw in the middle of the air.
Correct. So the trick to it is, if Mario is looking left, and then you have Mario look right while holding a shell, that shell actually passes through Mario. If you release the shell while the shell is in the middle of Mario, you can then bounce off of it.
Oh dear.
What?
Correct.
That's terrible.
Yeah, so that's gone. So you can't build levels that rely on that anymore.
A lot of things have been tightened up, I think, as well. Like, I don't know. It's fun. Like, Mario Maker is a fun game, and this is Mario Maker on a Switch, which means there's a whole lot more people playing it and a whole lot more people making levels for it. I'm hopeful it continues to get the support it deserves.
Mario Maker 1 got a lot of support through the years.
It did. Up until the moment, I'm guessing they started working on Mario Maker 2. Because it went about 2 years without any support.
Sure, but that was after they decided the Wii U was not a thing they were going to be supporting much longer.
But yeah, there's obviously a lot of there's even room built into the game for future modes. Like there's obviously additional like game types that could theoretically get added. There's no more 100-man, but there's an endless mode now, and you can play either verse mode or co-op mode, and either way, you're going to hate the people you're playing against.
And isn't that the point?
Nintendo's view...
That version of New Super Mario Bros. 2 is divorce mode.
Nintendo's approach to co-op is really funny to me.
Non-Mario games handle it a lot better.
So I did run into my first level that could legitimately not be beaten without co-op.
Oh.
Like, at least I think it couldn't be beaten without co-op. Maybe there was a dev exit I didn't find. But, like, the idea of the thing was you're supposed to, like, have one person hitting the on-off switch while the other person traverses their way through a bunch of on-off blocks.
Wow, they recreated Gyromite.
Oh, this game's recreated a lot of things. I mean, they have Mega Man X blocks in there. Or Mega Man blocks in there, which are very fun. I guess they aren't quite Mega Man blocks. They're either on or they are off.
Also, you can see where they are going to be.
It's true.
Yeah, that's a big difference.
Yeah, this is a game I definitely want to play around with. There's too much stuff going on right now for me to mess with getting it.
There's a lot of games, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Like, normally I would have picked it up ahead of time, knowing at some point I will play with it, but I'm maybe starting to learn that it's okay just to let them stay on the storefront if I can't play them right now, because they'll only get cheaper.
Well, Nintendo games have a very hard time with that part.
Yeah, it's true. Although, like, the Switch platform seems to get decent enough sales.
It has had sales, which makes it ahead of basically every other Nintendo platform.
I'm not sure I understand what you mean. Like, do most Nintendo platforms not do that well?
No, I'm saying that Nintendo games tend to not go on sale.
Oh, yeah, I got it.
Yeah, and the Switch has had regular rotation of things going on sale. Or more so, the new modern Nintendo.com storefront interface.
I mean, every game you can get for 2 for $100.
It's true.
It's true.
For the next month.
Even in situations where that's a horrible deal, it
It's
will
true.
totally let you buy 2 games that are way less than $100 for $100.
Yes, there are some games on that list that are $40 or $50. Please do not buy these things with your whatever, with your online voucher.
Voucher, yeah. So I think we've gotten down to this point now. Another big thing that released this week is Shadowbringers, the Final Fantasy XIV expansion number 3?
Yep.
Yes. Early released.
I mean, come on, it's released.
The gates have not been thrown completely open.
It might as
If you
well be
bought the
released.
game, if you bought the expansion, you can play it now.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, I hadn't even bought the expansion until yesterday, and I can still... well, I can't play it because I'm not far enough, but that's because this is a Final Fantasy XIV game.
Yeah.
This...
Like, I mean, we'll probably do a spoiler show at some point, and this is definitely not that. But without...
she never did for Stormblood.
I guess we never did for Stormblood. But they've outdone themselves somehow?
So far, yeah.
I mean, first of all, like, the launch was incredibly smooth. Like, the only time things got hinky were due to a DDoS.
I mean,
I'm not aware of any server issues that are actually Square's fault.
Yeah, there's queues, but I mean, at least there are queues, and there are queues for solo instances, so you don't have Raubon Extreme anymore.
That's great.
There are queues for solo instances. There are queues to actually get in the game.
Mm-hmm.
Both of which are improvements over past things we've had to do for this game.
They have turned on timeouts on AFK, but they still haven't changed it so that you can't easily avoid it.
I was going to say they haven't fixed any of the exploits for that.
Thankfully.
So whatever.
But that's why they also said that if it becomes a problem, we're going to just shut down the servers and bring them right back up. You will turn it off and on again.
They know it's up.
If that's what it takes.
But it also seems like it hasn't become a problem.
No, yeah, it really doesn't.
I mean, I have not had to wait that long to ever get into the game.
The longest queue I have seen that was not like one of those giant queues that goes really fast. That's obviously just like trying to get people into the game slowly instead of all at once. Was about 900 people, and that was last night.
The longest queue that I've seen was 1,300 people, but it moved real fast, and it was at 2:05 a.m. on Friday morning. So,
yeah, that's why I kind of think that one was more of a just getting people in, a few at a time.
Yeah,
because they clearly do that. Like anytime the servers get crash or get brought back up after maintenance, there's always a giant queue, but it goes super fast.
Yeah, like the queue put me really high, and then I got through it at a very fast pace.
But like we're on a congested server, and when I logged on this afternoon, the queue was like 18.
Wow,
so
it got
for
higher
reference,
later on, but
I mean, this is a metric that our listeners can use. I had just crashed out and gotten back into queue before we started recording, and I got in probably about halfway through our first topic, so not super long.
You might have to wait 5 or 10 minutes.
Maybe longer if things bug out on you.
Yeah, maybe longer.
Which happened to me earlier.
Yeah. But it's certainly not the like, hey, I have 3 hours to play and I'm going to play for 50 minutes because that's how long it's going to take me to actually get in. And like, I planned the other day, because I took the day off, I thought it was going to be foolish of me to take the day off, and it wasn't. It was actually great because I got to play for the whole game. The whole day. It was fine.
Well, like Friday when I got off work, because that was the first I was able to play, other than just a little bit in the morning. I had prepped to have another game that I could sit there and play while ticking down the queue, and by the time I had started it logging in and gotten up to get a drink, I was already in when I got back. So
yeah, I got up, I opened the queue, decided to get breakfast, decided I would cook breakfast while in queue, and before I was able to finish getting in the queue and start my stove, I was in. I was like, all right, well, so much for breakfast. Still make breakfast. Spoilers.
So one of the this is like an impression I have is this is basically Final Fantasy's way of doing Outland. The Burning Crusade expansion, but like it's super creepy and it's super dire, but it's also familiar at the same time.
Yeah, because it's an alternate like shard of our world that was split off millennia ago, where things have gone really, really bad.
But the difference is, instead of the land being an obnoxious hellscape, just the people and the story are a terrible hellscape.
Yeah, it's Final Fantasy XIV does post-apoc horror, and wow, did they pull that one off?
Yeah, it really feels to me like, what if massive climate change triggered the zombie apocalypse?
I guess that's sure.
And like, what does it look like? What does a post-apoc world look like if the post-apoc part is like, I very rarely see post-apocalyptic worlds that aren't just smoking ruins everywhere. And this has a little bit of that, but no more than Eorzea.
I mean, I feel like the subtitle for this expansion could be called Too Much of a Good Thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this was they definitely went into this, wanting to show us that no, light is not the friendly, happy, thing that you think all the time. It can be creepy as hell, and it is.
Sure is.
And you're going to go through a story that is at times 14 or 15 sads out of 10.
Yeah, this is the first time. I normally have the thing where I beeline through the main story as fast as I can, and then I worry about doing other stuff later. This is the first time that I've been like, I finished a story arc and been like, I need to do something else.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go like level Gunbreaker. And it probably says something about how often I have chosen to do this as a result of story that my Gunbreaker is gonna be like 66 here shortly.
There are definitely times where I just shut the game down and did something completely else for a little while because story.
Yeah.
Yeah, it gets emotionally draining.
Yeah, it's very intense at some parts.
And it's a roller coaster too. I'm entirely here for it. Like, I love what they've done with what I've seen so far. I've loved what they've done. They're taking a bunch of storytelling risks and they're mostly paying off, and I like it.
Well, and I think like the kind of the difference that between like say a World of Warcraft story versus a Final Fantasy story is everything that's happening in this world is very nuanced. Like there are good and bad forces, but they're not exactly the clear lines that you would think in other settings.
Mm-hmm.
And also like it's a very adult story, and not as in X-rated, but as in I don't know, a lot of video game stories, especially like with early World of Warcraft, felt very very much like a He-Man story where you have big bad forces banging up against each other without any nuance to it at all.
Yeah.
And this is a situation that's going to make you feel awful at times, and at the same time make you question your own assumptions about your actions in the past.
Yeah, they're very good at remembering that actions have repercussions, and sometimes there is no good answer.
And it doesn't forget about stuff you've done. This is not a game where something that happened and was relevant in the last expansion is just going to be completely forgotten about. It does not drop its I don't know what the word I'm looking for is, but it doesn't drop its plot arcs.
Sometimes frustratingly. It remembers them better than I do.
Yeah.
Yes, it remembers them better than you do. And also sometimes you wish that you could be rid of some characters because they're awful, or you just don't want to deal with them. But nope, they're still around, and sometimes they're even on your side, and you just got to deal with it. How are you going to deal with it? Like, you going to kick them out? Maybe. Naked Rogadins with Moogle hats have been replaced by naked Hrothgar with Moogle hats.
Mm-hmm. And there's
Moogle
buttons
hat
everywhere.
Is one of the few full head pieces that Hrothgar can actually wear.
That's hilarious.
Just like they can wear head replacement items, like Odin's head.
Can they wear the pig head?
Probably. I don't have that tested.
They can wear the Chocobo head. They can wear the Moogle head.
I did immediately race change to Hrothgar, like I said I would, and picked up Dancer today, put together Glamour for it, and then decided it didn't have enough clothes. So I put together a different one with more clothes.
That will happen.
I mean, I feel like the original Bard outfit would make a good Dancer outfit.
I do have a decent portion of Ammon's outfit.
There you go.
Questionable outfit.
That is an amazing outfit. I don't know what you're talking about.
I'm happy to be a
best hat.
dwarf. I mean, apparently I knew all along that this was the correct choice to stay Lalafell.
But you're missing your helmet and beard.
Well, I've got as much of a beard as I have. Like, if I could give my Lalafell an actual beard, I would do so in a heartbeat. You know I would.
I mean, there is a Santa Claus beard. It's
Yeah,
dyeable.
but it looks awkward.
It does.
For the most part, I really like the class design. Jury's still out on Scholar. It definitely, the healing side of Scholar feels a lot stronger.
It feels okay. It feels real boring because they took all of our toys away for DPS.
Yeah.
I was going to say, I started playing Scholar, and I was like, oh, so I hit Bio and Broil?
Yep.
And I don't even have Bane anymore?
No, not having Bane is a noticeable loss.
I love Warrior. Just saying, Warrior got real good. Like, some stuff happened.
Clone went away.
I know, but we're getting it back. It'll be okay. Like, we'll have some awkward times. These are our awkward preteen years, but we'll get it back. It'll be okay. Actually, it's okay. I ran a dungeon earlier, and I was like, oh god, I don't have any active mitigation. And then Ash told me that they changed one of the abilities to be active mitigation. So now I have a 25-second cooldown thing that basically replaced what I was missing before. So now that I know that, it's awkward that I'm going to have to hit an extra button to get it, but whatever.
Guard didn't change much.
No.
They took away a couple of buttons, and I don't mind. It just means my muscle memory is off.
Summoner is a completely different class.
Summoner is a new class.
Yeah, like
Machinist is a new class.
Summoner actually, I was pretty skeptical about Summoner. I'm pretty okay with it, having played a whole bunch of it at this point. It definitely has. It feels like Summoner in the Final Fantasy sense. Like in any given fight, I'm gonna go through 3 or 4 different summons. Not I get my summon out and never change it. And I think that's really cool. And granted, part of how they accomplish that is through the summon Bahamut, summon Phoenix structure, but it works. WoW does the class suddenly have a whole lot of off GCDs though. Like
mostly in the pet abilities.
It had a few. Well, not just that. Pet abilities.
Also, Fester and Pain Flare got more common.
Yeah. Fester and Pain Flare are faster. Pet abilities are off global cooldown. And you're doing a lot more weaving. There's like 3 distinct... Summoner has like 3 distinct states it can be in. And they all have different rotations.
I feel like I need to read a guide on how to Dragoon now, because figuring out how to make all of these buttons work together and what the proper way to do things is something, A, I barely remember, and B, it's all just changed just enough.
Man, I feel like the guides that are on the official Final Fantasy XIV site are not exactly what you're looking for, but are like enough meat to piece it back together yourself.
Yeah, I was surprised at how good they were.
Because they also kind of go into like, this is what this used to be.
I mean, they do have detailed change notes in them, which is kind of nice. And weird for official thing to provide that, but sure.
Mm-hmm.
Also, I've talked about player fantasy before and how it's, kind of important. I finally have a tank that I like in this game.
Yay.
It only took 6 years.
Gunblade is a weird tank.
Yep, sure is.
I'm having a hard time adjusting to it because it has too many offensive abilities.
Yeah.
It reminds me more than anything of the experience of playing the Void whatever from Rift.
Yeah, the Riftstalker.
And because it's...
I mean, that is literally a tank class stapled to an offensive class of skeleton.
Yes, and that's what the Gunbreaker is. Like, the Gunbreaker is an offensive class that they kind of shoehorned into being a tank, making it probably incredibly awkward for anybody who's familiar with tanks, but I love it. It's great for me.
I'm also familiar with a lot of the melee DPS in this game, and not quite like any of them either.
Yeah.
Well, and there's 3 different combo chains?
There's 2, really. There's your actual combo, your actual 1-2-3 combo, which is just whatever.
Then you got your AoE 2-step combo, and then you've got your, if you have shells, you can do this combo.
Yes. That combo, which is perfectly fine when you pick up the class, it's 3 more abilities in it when you hit 70. There's really only one ability that you hit 3 times.
It goes
at all sane.
It goes from being a 3-step combo to a 6-step combo at level 70.
The biggest problem that I have right now is trying to get used to it is I feel like I got too damn many buttons.
It does have a lot of buttons. I'm getting used to it.
Also, what the hell is up with that defensive cooldown that reduces you to 1 hit point?
No, its unique defensive cooldowns are kind of garbage.
It's better than Living Dead, okay?
That is a low bar.
It is. It is a very low bar. Not everything can be Home Gang, I guess.
Home Gang is amazing.
I thought it had a stupid name, and then I found out that it has a name that's perfectly in keeping with the sub-theme of the class, which is celestial phenomena. I still think it's a stupid name, but at least I get it now.
It's basically as bad as that one ability that Warriors had where, like, you're going to get crit 100% of the time from the back if you use this. Don't ever use this if you're ever going to get hit from behind.
I mean, you could combine it with awareness to not get crit.
Yeah, but then
that was the only way I ever used it.
Right,
two
exactly.
buttons to use one button.
Right, you're spending 2 cooldowns at that point, so yeah.
But awareness was a bad cooldown anyway otherwise, so I didn't really care.
Yeah.
Its only use was versus Shiva.
I still had awareness in my macro of mash this button if things are going wrong.
On my paladin, every single button that was in that macro except Rampart went away.
Yeah, exactly. Same here. Because a lot of the newer cooldowns that I had gotten were they were unique, that you only wanted to use them in certain circumstances, so it never wanted to go into that macro.
Right.
All in all, other than the madness of Gunbreaker, I feel like every change that was made was to somehow make the class more accessible.
That I believe.
Yeah.
Being like, so the warrior thing, having a stance that gave you aggro but caused you to do less damage, but also caused you to have more health, just felt bad. So you ended up having to stance back and forth between 2 stances, which was doable, but also didn't feel great. So now just not having that, I'm down with that. I still miss Steel Cyclone.
I also miss Steel Cyclone.
I miss the heals from Steel Cyclone.
You almost get that one back later.
I love that Overpower now has a combo step. I love the absence of TP.
Yes.
Oh, yes.
That's great all around.
Yes.
It results in Dancer being a really weird class.
It makes every melee class... The biggest change across the board that I've seen is that AoE on every class is not an afterthought.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
And it already kind of wasn't for a lot of melee classes. You just couldn't do it for very long because TP. And now, like, Red Mage...
Honestly, Samurai was the only class with fully realized AoE, in my opinion.
Fair. Ninja, I thought.
Ninja had a ground dot, and then they had a bad ability that you spammed until you could do other things.
That's fair.
That is a combo now, by the way.
Oh, good.
That extends Huton.
Wow, that's actually very good. Summoner, all 3 of Summoner's AoE rotations are pretty fun. 4. I don't actually know if Phoenix is going to be another rotation or if it's just going to work like Demi Bahamut does.
It's 3. Doesn't work like Demi Bahamut. It comes with Firebird Trance.
Oh, okay.
And that becomes a thing. And attacks when you attack.
Okay. So it works exactly like Demi Bahamut, but
aligned with the trance rather than afterward.
Yeah. Cool, that's fine.
I do like some of the quality of life changes. I really love the new retainer window.
Oh, God,
yeah, that's
so
a nice
good.
improvement.
Oh
Like,
yeah,
just-
that retainer window is amazing.
Just the simple, like if they gave me nothing other than the ability to see whether or not there was money sitting on the retainer, that alone was worth it for me.
Yeah, they've added a ton of quality of life. The storytelling is great. I really like the new class mechanics for the most part. It'll be interesting to see where they go with them because I'm obviously not 80 yet. But like Summoner isn't going to change much from 70 to 80. Once you have Firebird Trance, it doesn't change dramatically.
How does Firebird Trance differ from Dreadworm Trance?
Entirely. So there's
I know they both set the cooldown on Dry Disaster and reduce the cast down of your spells.
Yeah. So core summoner rotation is get dots up, consume ether flow, get dots up, consume ether flow, cast ruin. Dreadworm Trance says, okay, keep your dots up, maybe reapply them if you need to, cast ruin instantly, finish with
Death Flare?
Yeah, finish with Death Flare. Demi Bahamut, when Demi Bahamut is out, you want to align things so that you are using as many off GCD single target abilities as possible in that time frame.
Careful, those don't trigger Bahamut anymore. It only triggers off spells, so try to remove that optimization.
Yeah, but
not abilities.
Outburst, for example, does not trigger Demi Bahamut.
It should.
It doesn't.
Oh, it's not a single target spell.
It's not a single target spell.
All right.
But what that means, functionally what that means is, because you want to get as many single target spells off as quickly as you can, what you need to have done leading up to it is build up your Further Ruin stacks by using pet abilities so that you can unload them all when Bahamut is out. And he Akmorns a couple of times. It's amazing. And what Firebird Trance does is change Ruin and Outburst to crazy-ass fire spells and makes them instant. And casting the Ruin replacement procs a giant damage buff on the AoE replacement.
Oh.
So you alternate between the two of them. And it is a large enough... the AoE replacement becomes a Death Flare-like ability, if I remember correctly. So you do actually want to alternate them, even on single targets. So this is what I mean when I say Summoner has 4 distinct rotations that you cycle between.
Brand of Purgatory. Interesting.
Yeah, it's a whole thing. There's a lot going on.
This is giving me T12 flashbacks. Just reading this ability list.
So are you using Eggy Assault now?
Constantly.
That's sort of the new ability?
Eggy Assault is how you get your pets to do things, and when Ifrit or Garuda do things, you get stacks of Further Ruination, which stack up to 4, and they take Ruin 2, which didn't really have a lot of purpose for a summoner, and make them, makes it a whole bunch stronger.
Oh, another addition that has turned out pretty great is the trust system.
Oh, yes. I love the trust system. I just ran through, right before the podcast, I ran through a dungeon with the trust system.
Because of the trust system, this may actually be the expansion where I finally, use all of the classes that I level and actually run things with people in lots of different roles. Because I can practice tanking or healing with a group of companions who I know will do their jobs reasonably well. And so I can be sure that if things go badly, it's something I did.
Yeah, they're companions that have surprisingly fully developed AI and personalities. Even there's some funny stuff going on. For example, Thancred has a companion. Thancred will position bosses to protect this companion, to the sometimes detriment of other party members. Alphino will maybe wait a little bit to heal Alice over other people. Alice will stand in fire to finish her melee combo, but will also...
How is that different than any other red mage?
I was going to say, like any good red mage, that's what you do.
But she'll also emergency Vercure. I think it would be really fun to do as a tank or as a DPS. I'm not sure I would do it again as a healer. Just because it's really good for roles that you're not roles and classes that you're not familiar with. But if you're very familiar with it, you're going to be like, okay, we could be pushing this a little harder.
Right. Yeah, you're not going to be speedrunning stuff. It was also really handy for the first dungeon that when I fought bosses I hadn't seen before, I could, watch the mechanics and then also watch where Alphino ran to and follow him because he was pretty good at going to a good place.
Yeah, Alphino has read all the fights beforehand. Alice has not and does just fine. There was actually a boss, the last boss of the second dungeon that I did in the trust system I'm not going to spoil the mechanic, but one of the boss mechanics triggered a whole bunch of scripted personality pieces for all of the characters. And that was really cool. Yeah, also, that boss has a frankly terrible mechanic that I was not expecting and is going to make people mad and made me mad. And I'm glad that I had the trust party to deal with it. It is one of the first times I've been in an encounter, seen a mechanic for the first time, but known exactly what to do, and then you just have to do it. But it's very cool. The encounter design is really good.
So that is a word of warning about this expansion, is you're going to encounter a first dungeon, and it is kind of a wake-up call that this game is going to put some serious mechanics in its leveling dungeons now.
Yeah.
It's been a slow ramp-up process over the last couple of expansions, but like it's raid mechanics, the fight.
I mean, Heaven's Ward hit
Part
you
two.
really hard at 57.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Stormblood gave it to you 2 levels earlier at 65. This one they just decided, why wait? I guess.
This is like, look,
You've been here for a while now.
if you're playing this, we know that you've done all of the post Stormblood content, including that instance and that duty. So we're just we know how competent you are, how competent you have to be to get here. So why pull punches?
Yeah. You've seen all these signals before. Deal with them.
Yep.
I mean, that's one thing I do love about Final Fantasy XIV is, like, that dungeon basically is a refresher course in all of the symbols that you see in those games, and they're all clear. Like, they all have a thing that you're supposed to do when this symbol comes up. I mean, honestly, like, this is the first MMO that I've played that I would probably consider voice chat optional for raiding.
To a certain extent, yeah, because you have, in a lot of cases, you need to work things out ahead of time.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, I think at this point it's a good experience so far, and we have a lot more to go before we reach the end.
Yep.
And I think we have gone over our time, or just about right time.
Seems about right.
Hopefully you enjoyed the show, and we will see you again next week. Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
See you.